Didn't do what it normally does.
Recording in progress.
Yeah.
It
says
says recording
it's
now,
recording.
it does say that.
The cloud.
Okay, with 7 o'clock, we'll call the regular February 2024 Village Council meeting to order. Let the roll call show that trustees Harper, Conley, Cavendish, Gale, and President McCann are present. And Cook is absent, and we have Hager by Zoom. And we've got our treasurer, clerk, and village manager in attendance as well. First up, we've got approval of the council meeting minutes, January 4th regular meeting and the 12th special meeting. I think we've got to approve those individually. So we'll start with the 4th, if anyone.
Yeah, well, Johnny's sitting down and we have to approve the January 4th minutes as distributed.
Yeah, I'll support.
Okay, moved by Jane, supported by Laura. Any discussion?
Couldn't find a single thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, all those in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. All right, those are approved. We'll move on to the January 12th.
Move to approve the minutes for the January 12th special meeting.
I'll support.
All right, moved by Barb and supported by Laura to approve the January 12th special meeting minutes. Any discussion on those?
And I didn't see anything.
All right, excellent. So all in favor to approve January 12th special meeting minutes, say aye.
Yeah.
Opposed? All right, those are approved. Next up, we've got approval of the agenda. Any amendments or additions? Okay, motion to approve the agenda.
So move.
Support.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, all right, brings us to our first public comment. If you're here in person as public or in Zoom, we'll recognize you and you'll have 5 minutes to speak. Anyone willing to? This is your time. Seeing nobody jump at the opportunity, we'll move on to our correspondence. We did have several correspondence in this month's meeting. We had some letters from Christy Fisher, Bruce Vijay. Those were in the Dropbox.
There's also a letter
Let's see, from
There's also a letter from the Leelanau Township Foundation, Community Foundation.
and Susie Moffett down there on Fifth.
Mhm.
That's all I had. Anything on those? Staff reports. First up is the clerk.
She's just
She's
very.
on-
Confirming that it's recording.
Oh,
so you can
oh.
answer the question. She's just.
Good call.
Moving fast here.
Sorry.
I just want to make sure it's recording,
Yeah.
because there's it's kind of a lot of important things, and so I will go back in there, but I did provide the council with the December financial reports, bill sheet, and reconciliation. And January will come, but I've completed the quarterly reports for the village in the month of January. Well, W-2s, as it said in my report, and working on the annual reports that are due next. So, spend it, yes.
Yeah, Tony, can you explain to me on the bill sheet, what's close CD?
Oh, probably closed is what
Yeah.
it was supposed to say. There was a CD for the wind turbine that was part of our agreement, and the wind turbine is no longer there. However, there's solar up there, so the village, according to their separate agreements, the solar agreement and the wind turbine agreement. So we do receive an annual lease or rental payment from Leelanau Community Energy.
CD was a kind of a guarantee that if the turbine fell down, which it ultimately did, then it would be cleaned up and removed, and it was cleaned up and removed, so we refunded essentially gave them back. There was no need for the security any longer, so we provided the CD in return.
Didn't we have some costs on that though? I mean, I know DPW spent a lot of time. I mean, shouldn't we build that out and not return it in full?
Originally, if I may, originally they were going to be spending time up there helping them remove it, and they did not.
It was done by, essentially it was a salvage company agreed to take the salvage in exchange for removing it.
Yeah, but they didn't,
Yeah.
they left a mess.
Yeah,
That's
like,
what Chris told me.
I think he
Mhm.
said in infrastructure that they had to help them.
Yeah, it was talked about in infrastructure
Yeah.
committee that our DPW spent a lot of time and resources helping them
Right,
out.
we'll review that, find out.
Yeah, I followed up with the DPW before the check was cut to make sure the site had been cleaned up, and there were two parties that assisted with the cleanup on that, besides maybe the DPW.
Yeah. I
But
mean,
shouldn't
I'm
we
quite
build
confident
them?
that
Shouldn't we
they
be subtracting our guys' hours out of that $12,000 before we refund it in full?
It's been refunded, I think.
Well, it should have
I
been.
would think that this can be discussed, but I would think that if there are hours to be billed, that they could be billed to Leelanau
Yeah.
Community Energy. You know, this was like a security, I think you said.
Well, yeah, but that's why you have the security, so you take the billable hours out before we refund it.
If we have record of billable hours, we can,
I didn't, yeah,
we can,
the DPW
Follow
would
up
have to
with them.
turn that in,
yeah.
and they were asked.
Okay,
Mhm.
all right.
I'll follow up on that and report back to you.
Yeah, if I may, there's a lot of DPW hours that get spent on things like Uncaged and stuff like this that never get billed. Homecoming parade and other things. And it seems like yeah, that's great. It's a small town way of doing things, but when we had a security deposit specifically to cover this cost, we absolutely should have billed them for every minute those guys were up there. They're not cheap employees.
Well, I mean, I thought the clerk said that the DPW didn't turn in any hours for it.
Well, they should have, because they said in the committee that they were up there a significant amount of time, and that's a significant cost to the village, and that's why we had that deposit.
I
So
think Jim said he's
I
gonna,
think somebody needs to follow up on that.
oh, Jim said he's gonna follow up already. I saw him write it
Mhm.
down, so I think he'll get in tune with that.
So there was no overtime? For the
I
whole time?
asked the DPW specifically for their time.
No, I mean, not on that. When I look at the bill pay sheet, sorry. I already
Oh,
changed.
for
I
December?
don't see any overtime.
It may not have been something that I captured in the report,
Okay,
but,
I just
December
was like, if there was no,
month.
yeah,
I'm
I
sure
also-
there may have been.
okay.
Yeah. Again, I'm your clerk and treasurer at this.
Yeah, I was trying
Yeah.
to do both. I get it.
Anything else for the clerk?
And it's December.
Yeah.
So treasurer, deputy clerk. Joni and Beth, do you wanna split that or
Oh,
anything to report?
no,
Okay.
no, our new treasurer has been in, and I just, her start date, I'm sure Jim has reported that is February 19th, Monday. And so Beth is here and is our administrative assistant. I don't know if she would like to say anything.
Yeah, it's excited to be here.
All right, DPW, there was a report in the packet and I don't know if Chris is at Christopher iPhone 2 or if he's on.
I don't see them up there.
Oh,
I think you would have chimed in just now.
sure,
Mhm.
I don't think he's in attendance.
okay, if anybody has any questions to report, I'm sure Jim could probably touch on some of them.
I mean, I didn't have a question, but I wanted to say that when we had snow, I had a lot of, there was online chatter and I've had in-person comments about how great the sidewalks have been. So I wanted to thank them for that because it's awesome.
I would also indicate that I've had a lot of comments about the street maintenance during the snow events was quite good. And that was accomplished when we had the clutch go out on the main truck that's used, and that was about $7,500 to fix that and $800 to tow it, and that's been that's been resolved, but it's back, but it was, they did that good job with substitute, equipment, so.
Yeah, thanks to Cal
Yeah,
for helping out with the sand spreader there.
Yeah, exactly.
Anything else for DPW report? If not, we'll move on to the marina. Harbor master report was in the Dropbox. Anybody have any questions for Bill on that? No? Okay. We've got village manager, zoning administrator. Again, report is here in front of us.
Yeah, there were a couple things that I did want to touch on directly. You'll note that we have 5 items that are on our new business discussion, potential action items, 9, A through E. And I tried to touch on the three, probably the 3 most significant of those. As Joni noted, we do have Elizabeth Brennan, Beth, as our new administrative assistant. She started a couple weeks back, been helping us out. And Diana will start on the 19th. That's completed. I do indicate in the item number 4 regarding the Housing North Partnership contract since our last meeting and the discussion about the possible request for a contract from them to contract with the village on that. I've done quite a lot of research on that since then. They are in transition with new employees coming on board and that sort of thing. The executive director did offer to come here to give a synopsis of what it is they do and why a relationship between the village and Housing North would be a good idea. Since then, I've also met with Mike McMillan. We talked extensively about what the village might do with the township. We've got a couple ideas in the works, one of which is the possibility, and I've mentioned several times, the idea of the Joint Planning Commission, and an idea that came out of a meeting with the city of Frankfurt, which has a 20-year history of working on attainable housing. I believe it's Josh Mills, is that his? Josh Mills is the city manager down there. And Mike and I met with him. He spent the entire morning with us, really, and giving us ideas on what they do and how they do it. And more importantly, why they do it as well. One of the ideas that came out of that Mike and I have been talking about is the possibility of creating a joint planning commission, which I've talked about over the course of the last several months, but combining that as well with a village housing commission, where that joint planning commission would function in both capacities and really be charged with looking at the issue of housing and attainable housing in both the village and the township. And we pursued that. It's an idea that's one of the things that they did in Frankfurt. And Mike and I even just met this morning with the coffee group and with Larry Mobby at Peninsular Housing. And the sense of everybody that we talk to is if you're going to be serious about attainable housing, you do have to have a relationship with Housing North. They are funded by they're funded by the state of Michigan, and they'll basically be the gatekeepers of grant money and provide really all the state resources regarding housing that we could possibly use. So they have also offered, again, if we had a viable project by either a public or private developer, they would be willing to partner with us directly on that to provide, housing resources, grant assistance, that sort of thing. So, I think we need to decide whether we're going to be serious about this and if so, pursue a relationship with them. Like I said, at some time in the future, particularly once they get their current staff in order, we'll have the director here to talk to you directly about that. You'll note item number 6, we're making a recommendation to hire UHY, a multi-state CPA firm as our village auditor. That came out of a process where we actually interviewed 2 audit firms, both of which have offices in Cadillac. UHY also has an office in Traverse City, although Derek Graham, the partner that would work with us, is currently located in Cadillac. It turned out they would have been my recommendation between the 2 that we interviewed. The second firm decided once they determined that they were planning to schedule our audit early this spring, thinking that our fiscal year was going to end at the end of this month. But when we informed them that our fiscal year was going to change and we were going to be adopting an amended budget and we have essentially a 16-month fiscal 2003, 2004, they backed out because that audit would have to occur sometime in October, September-October timeframe, and they were not going to have the capacity to do that at that time. The costs were roughly the same. I think the way that UHY approached the audit was slightly favorable, but not substantially, but they would have been my recommendation in that regard. One of the things we talked to them about was, as part of the audit would be the assistance that they would provide to give us some guidance regarding best practices and policies that we ought to adopt to make sure there's a proper separation of duties. That's been a shortcoming in the audits in the past. And they made it clear to us that that's actually a common thing for small villages and small townships. It doesn't make it any less of a problem, but it's a common thing. And they did endorse the process that we're focusing on right now, where we will have a separate treasurer doing essentially accounts receivable, the clerk doing accounts payable for village business, with the village manager having an oversight over both. And that they thought that was a proper means of doing so, but they will provide us with some, again, guidance, forms, policies that we should adopt to make that process work smoothly, both for us as an internal process and for them when they get to the point of auditing our statements. We also I discussed with the firm that backed out of the audit process, the possibility that we might retain them for the separate task of preparing our financial statements. You'll remember that the third weakness, if you will, one of 2 findings in our past audits. One of them has been the fact that we have relied upon our auditing firm to essentially make the year-end adjustments and to prepare the final version of our financial statements. And that's considered, again, it's a common thing for small governments as we are, but it is something that's considered they're not auditing an internal process. They're essentially auditing their own process, and that's less than optimal. So I did inquire with the other CPA firm whether they would be willing to work with us on potentially resolving that shortcoming, if you will, and they were willing to consider that process. We probably, if we go down that road, we're not budgeting for it currently. We would have to do a budget amendment to consider that, and you will have the opportunity to weigh the pros and cons of whether that's an appropriate use of our funds for for consulting fees. The final item is the Three Rivers property line dispute proposed resolution. That's been, you have that to review. I've spent a considerable amount of time, really since my first arrival here in October, working on finding a creative way to resolve that dispute. I think most of you are aware that that has been the holdup with the Three Rivers Properties extending the lease of the Mitten Brewing Company. Again, I believe we've worked that out to a way that's acceptable to Three Rivers and to the Mitten. So it remains, the solution that remains for you to consider and potentially approve this evening. When we get to that item, I'll have some more to say about that. Item number 8, we talk about the budget amendments. The one thing I think I want to really emphasize is it appears, if you look just at the 4 months that we're talking about right now, it would appear as though we're adopting a substantial deficit budget. It would appear that way because the general fund, for example, will require for that 4-month period essentially $165,000 from fund balance. The reason for that is the 4 months that we're talking about are basically, from our perspective, 100% expense months, because the revenue that will be balanced against those expenses in that 4 months will not be collected until the 2024-2025 budget year, when the July, the summer taxes that we rely primarily on to fund the general fund will occur. So despite that fact that it looks that way, in reality, it's not, because you'll end up in the 2024-2025 fiscal year budget with a substantial amount of revenue that will not have expenses, have those same expenses offset against it. So that's something that I think primarily for the public, as you consider that item, that I wanted to make sure that I mentioned. The rest of the report is updates on upcoming issues. I did indicate there are really 3 things that I know for sure will be on, more than likely on the next agenda, certainly in the future, if not the next agenda, would be the adoption of a resolution regarding the Leelanau County Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan. That is a plan that's adopted at the county level, which we endorse. And by so endorsing that plan, we become eligible for the primary objective of that is we become eligible for disaster relief funds from the state and federal level. We also are able to seek risk mitigation grants for because we've adopted that plan, and the local emergency management, the county emergency management office has indicated they're willing to come out and do ad hoc risk assessments for things like the water system, which we already do. And any facility that we have, they could do a risk assessment regarding this building, for example. I anticipate, I had hoped it would be on this meeting, but I'm still working on the extension of the golf course management contract. That's coming up. It actually doesn't expire until the end of this golf year, but the management company has asked that we consider that extension early on this season. And then the final item is I've been asked by a number of businesses in the downtown area to more actively pursue the idea of the adoption of a social district ordinance that will permit the use of essentially carrying alcohol from alcohol sold at one facility, licensed facility to another, and use outdoors within what's defined as a social district. That's pretty much it for my report.
What?
I have a question, but not on any of the ones you did. It's on the
Okay.
zoning administrator stuff, on the land use permit for John Wilmer. You say that it would need a variance. So in general provisions, there's the dwellings on more than one lot, 3.07, that doesn't apply, or?
I think one lot has the dwelling and one lot has the garage.
And that's exactly, so the general provision says if a structure is to be located on a parcel of land containing 2 or more lots under single ownership, the entire parcel shall be considered a lot for purposes of this ordinance, which our understanding and planning, because we've discussed it and are changing it actually, but it's still, we're still running on the old stuff. Our understanding was that that would mean that you don't have to follow, it counts as one big lot.
It could, yeah.
So if that's the case, would he still need the variance or?
Possibly,
Okay, I just wanted to be sure that he doesn't have to do the variance if he doesn't have to. If he puts in his permit and he's set, then maybe he doesn't need to do the
primarily
variance.
the reason and he's paid the appropriate fee. They're going down for a couple months to Florida, and he wanted to have that issue at least in the process while he was down there. So
Okay, well, it's 3.07, so
if
if,
we can determine that
Yeah.
it's not necessary, we'll refund that,
Yeah.
refund that fee. So,
I have a question, a
I
couple
think that-
questions.
I would have asked you sooner, I'm sorry, I didn't read it till I got
We
here.
have
no problem.
had people who combined parcels to get around it as well.
Yeah, and the specific discussion that I had with him was to do that for that purpose. He has some reasons why he would not want to do that. And I think that for the 3.07 provision, although it may permit it, I think it can create as many problems as it solves.
That's why we're removing it. We're actually getting rid, because what the planning commission discussion has been, and the reason it got removed if the new version gets adopted, is because we would just rather that people combine lots. Because instead of having then a non-compliant one, because you could still sell it, and then it would be silent. But as long as this is on the books, to me, it seems like he wouldn't need to do the variance potentially, maybe, but I wasn't sure if there was something else that I wasn't considering.
Even if you, because what I would propose would be a conditional variance. It would be conditioned on the 2 properties remaining in common ownership, and if at any time there was not common ownership, within a defined period of time, the non-conforming accessory use would be converted to a primary use in some fashion.
Yeah,
And I think that you've got that issue in other locations in the village, and that's why I suggested to him that we consider the variance route at this point to define that.
well, and
again, he wasn't sure when he was gonna start.
right, because that's part of it too, because if he doesn't file until the new stuff is adopted, then it's removed,
So
so.
he filed for the land use permit already.
Already,
so it would be
okay.
considered
Yep, so it
under
would be
the
then.
zoning ordinance.
Okay,
But if it under 3.07, I could simply approve the land use permit, but I would want to say that it's conditioned on it remaining in sole ownership or common ownership, and to be converted if it's ever split. So,
Susan, you had your hand up?
Yeah, a couple questions
I
on,
can't
we
hear
can't
you.
hear you.
well, I've unmuted. I'm sorry, I'm,
Doesn't say she's muted though, so we can't hear you though.
Oh, maybe we didn't hear it say your recording is progress. Maybe our audio in is.
probably.
I don't know, I'm unmuted.
The volume on the TV might be on.
We'll just forget it then.
Okay, because it was saying turn your volume up earlier.
Yeah, it did say that.
Our speaker. It's the Jabra, so it should
I can
be
hear you,
from the
Susan.
Jabra to the microphone.
Nicole can hear me.
Yeah.
I can hear you,
Somebody else should
Susan.
try to talk,
Thank you.
see if we can
You
hear
can-
them.
So these
Uh,
speaker and microphone are both the same, which,
Make sure the computer is.
You could use the display audio, go to Roku TV.
Nicole, can they hear you?
Select a speaker, yeah, there you go. No, that one right there, yeah.
Nicole and Kathy can hear. Can they hear you? Have
We
you-
got you. We're back, we're back.
We're back. Can you hear me now?
Like Led Zeppelin.
Okay, Jim, I apologize. I can't find your manager's report in the Dropbox, so I don't know exactly what I'm talking about here, but you mentioned some kind of collaboration with some
You talking about Housing West, or excuse me.
Housing North.
county agency, was it, that does risk assessment?
Oh, that's
Jim?
the emergency.
Now you're frozen and I can't hear anything.
Yeah.
It says my internet connection is unstable.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Okay, well,
That's
That
a first.
be the county risk management, emergency management department.
Right. Is that an organization that can assess the risk of our dam?
No.
Okay, forget it then. Second question, is there any reason that we shouldn't vote on the support for Housing North tonight?
I don't really have enough,
We
information.
still have a contract with them that hasn't expired yet.
Well, I'm not sure we
Well,
do.
Because I thought we rejected the idea of renewing or paying whatever we needed to pay because we didn't know enough. But I think we know enough.
Well,
They said they were planning to come and speak, right? I mean, he's.
Right, but they can't. They
It's not
can't.
on
They're
the-
busy. They're et cetera.
yeah, I mean, we could, but I would like to have it more clearly defined, before I present it to you for a vote.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Conley?
Thanks. Yeah, Jim, I would like to strongly support, working with Housing North and doing everything that we can do as a village council to, get additional, especially attainable housing here in Northport. You know, people who can afford things seem to be building all over the place, but people who can't afford things, they still need housing. And that, you know, brings new families here and keeps our village alive, as you well know. But I had a couple questions on, the auditor.
Sure.
Did you just go out and talk to these people based on something, or was there an RFP involved, or?
What we sought was, proposals from them. We didn't do a formal RFP. Primarily because we didn't think we'd have time to do that, to be honest. And we thought the field of potential candidates was very limited. We were really only able to get two local CPA firms to be even interested in submitting proposals. And I pursued I don't recall the name of the organization, but it's like, yourauditor.com. It was essentially a group that aggregated, and hooked up governments and businesses with potential auditors, and didn't get anything that I thought was particularly satisfactory out of that. I was frankly satisfied with the two proposals that we received, and they were virtually identical in terms of cost, and it really got down to a question of either one of them would have been perfectly fine, I would think, and we also did it frankly in tandem with the township as well as Nutula, and one of the possibilities, you know, the township's going to take this up, and I think with this potentially the same recommendation, and we might have the same auditor for all three, which will possibly create a slight but not insignificant possibly $500 savings, I think, was
Per agreement,
per
so
agreement.
three,
So,
500.
yeah,
Yeah.
500.
So, yeah, that was my other question. How do they arrive at a price for an audit?
That's a good question. I really couldn't tell you, how they arrive at the price, because they know the process they have to undertake, and they
They figure how many
they know
hours?
what, they know what team they're going to use. They know it takes UHY, the team that we selected. They'll have 4 or 5 people on the team. They'll come in, do field work for 3 or 4 days, give us a draft audit. In fact, one of the things I liked about UHY, the partner in charge of the audit says his general practice is to do an exit interview with a draft of the RFP when they're done with a draft of the audit when they're
report.
done with the field work. So you're getting feedback immediately, not months down the road when, it's not fresh in your mind, so.
I need clarity if you need it.
Oh, it's
as
okay.
well. Okay.
So we did do a formal RFP about 5 years ago, and we still have those documents if you're interested in reading through how they calculate their expenses. It was fairly detailed.
They come in surprisingly close to
Mhm.
each other, so there is, yeah, they're not just,
There's a standard, yeah.
yep, they're not throwing darts at the board.
Yeah,
Okay.
they know, like I said, they know their business and they know what their competitors do as well. And, in past employment, it's been my same experience as well. But down in the southeast and southwest part of the state, you'll get a whole lot more, firms that are willing to compete for that.
We know that story.
Okay, anything else for Jim? All right, thank you, Jim. Committee reports, just one on the docket. We've got finance.
And the minutes were in Dropbox. I can answer any questions. But most of our work was on the budget amendments, and we're going to cover that under the discussion action items.
Any questions for Jim? Okay, ex officio board reports. We got planning commission. Back to you, Jane.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I thought that I submitted the planning commission minutes for Dropbox, but I didn't see them get in there. So you had the report from the planning commission chair at the last meeting about the 7th Street project. You know that we're scheduling a public hearing to discuss the zoning amendments at our next meeting. The planning commission is beginning work on updating the master plan. We have in the works a citizen input questionnaire that's being finalized to get more direct comments from members of the public. And there's one
Zoning amendments.
that's coming
Sure,
up for the March 7th meeting. I don't know. But at any rate, I will attempt to have the minutes in the Dropbox prior to our next meeting.
Any questions for Jane? Okay. NLTUA, the January 16 NLTUA meeting minutes were in the packet. Any questions on those?
Joni, did you see my?
I heard you say it. I
Oh,
didn't see your email, but I heard you say I was,
Yeah.
I was missing a board member.
We approved the chair, Mike McMillan, and the clerk, Joni Scott, for NL2A to reach out and hire a audit firm, which is, I think, UHY. And they were pleased with them. We did have a discussion about the structure between the village clerk and the township treasurer, the separation of duties for NL2A. And we're finalizing our draft budget for 24-25, and there is a copy of that in the Dropbox as well for you to look at. Any questions? Okay. Brings us to our discussion, potential action items. A, consider recommended resolution of a property line dispute. And Jim, you said you did have more you wanted to touch on. I guess, but we want to a motion before we get into discussion, or do we want to let Jim go first? What's the procedure here for that?
It's up to the council, but I can certainly give you an overview before a motion or after, at your preference.
Why don't we just go do it now?
Well, this issue predates my time as village manager. But it's also frankly dominated my time since coming here. There's been quite a lot of work and discussion on it. What it essentially boils down to is there was a dispute regarding the ownership and use of Park Street. And I think you all know the history. I'm not going to go into that in great detail, but there was an attempt to resolve this issue with a replat of that parcel or that area of the village. The difficulty really arises that the plat that creates Park Street did two things. The portion of Park Street that is currently paved is identified on that plat as a 20-foot wide easement, or excuse me, right of way. But there is no direct dedication of that right of way to the village. It's just indicated as an extension of Wakazu Street. As you know, it doesn't directly line up. So there, with the existing right of way of Wakazu Street. But over the course of time, it developed into Park Streets as it is right now, which is essentially that 20-foot right of way, which would go from the northern boundary of Naganava Street north towards what was platted as Second Street but never developed. And as it goes to the north, it then turns to the west and then goes back to the north and connects up to Third Street. And there's really no record of how, well, I shouldn't say that, there's no platted record that I could find regarding how the rest of Park Street was developed beyond the 20-foot that was dedicated in the plat of, I believe was 1911, 1919, something like that. The 20-foot right of way only goes, as I said, from the northern line of Naganava Street north and immediately parallel to the eastern lot lines of the two lots that are called lots A and B that are currently owned. Lot A is owned by Three Rivers Properties LLC, and that is where the Milton Brewery is located. And then the house owned by Carl Wazinski is Lot B to the north. And the 20-foot right of way runs alongside those two lots. My understanding is there was some dispute where Carl believed that he owned essentially to where the opposite side of Park Street. I think he agrees now and has at some time in the past agreed that he didn't own that. He didn't own the eastern 16 feet of that. He did assert that he owned the western 4 feet of that area. And since then has basically refused to extend the lease for the Mitten Brewery until this issue was resolved. What the proposal does is deed to, by quitclaim deed, and legally what a quitclaim deed is nothing more than one party telling another that if I have any interest in this property at all, I'm not warranting to you I have any interest, but if I do, I'm giving it to you. We'll quit claim that eastern 4 feet of the property to Three Rivers and a very small portion of that, not the entire portion of it, because the way that line comes, it actually cuts off. It's primarily, the 4 feet is primarily only on the partial of the property owned by Three Rivers, and then a very, very small triangle of it on the property owned by Carl. And we'll deed that to him, and in exchange, he will lease to the village under essentially the same terms as we have used in the past for our signs at the welcome signs coming into the village. Lease to the village the right to use, decorate, and maintain the large evergreen tree that's referred to as the holiday or Christmas tree. That's where celebrations have taken place. And deed that to us, or not deed, but lease to us for that purpose, as well as lease to the village the use of the brick and stone wall fronting on Neganeva Street for the placement of what's currently a temporary Northport sign. The lease provides, however, that we can, with a design approved by him and the Mitten Brewery, create a permanent sign there if it be our desire to do so. That's the bottom line. The lease for that property is for 5-year terms, essentially three automatically renewable 5-year terms. That lease could only expire before then if at some point in time the brewery no longer is actively operating. Primarily, the reason for that is if that were to occur, Carl would want to be able to develop in some other way that property potentially. And the second event would be if in fact that tree was to die or the village were to abandon any use of it, that the lease would expire. Otherwise, it would continue at least for 15 years, and it could be renewed beyond that time. Is it a perfect solution? I don't think there is such a thing as a perfect settlement. Is it something where the village is getting fair return for value? Again, I can't answer that. That's a policy question for you as the village council. I will say this: the one thing I think you need to know as you're considering your vote, the most that we acquire, we do not acquire under the highway by user statute. We do not require ownership of the property. We require an easement. Acquire an easement. And that case is Minerva Properties versus First Passage LLC. It's a 2007 Michigan Court of Appeals case. So what we're giving up, that 4 feet strip we're giving up, we have only an easement, not full ownership.
Right away. I think you misspoke.
It's actually an easement. It's not a right of way. Minerva Properties specifically refers to what's acquired by a municipal entity is an easement. Now, there really is no there are some technical legal differences between what a right of way and an easement is, but it's an easement for public use, not an easement that's private. So for all intents and purposes, it's a right of way, but Minerva Properties specifically uses the term easement. And you can only acquire by highway by user, only acquire that area that you actually use. Now, we've actually used 20 feet for that first 100 yards, or 100 feet. We've actually used 20 feet. There's no question about that. The balance of Park Street, however, is, who knows? When I have measured it, it's anywhere from 13 to 16 feet. This agreement, though, only impacts the portion of the property that is adjacent to lots A and B owned by Carl and his company, Three Rivers LLC. It doesn't restrict our use of Park Street as it goes north away from there. There really are only three properties that I'm pretty sure there are only three properties that touch on that street other than property that is already 100% owned by the village. Because it ends up, as you all know, at the DPW building that's front on Third Street. So again, we're talking about 1/100th of an acre of land. I don't know what that's worth. I can't tell you what an easement is worth for that land, but I personally believe I can tell you without any doubt, this is the best settlement we're going to get out of this. And the only other alternative would be to proceed to litigation, either initiated by the village, which I wouldn't recommend, or initiated by Carl of Three Rivers, which I doubt will occur. So other than this, I think this issue remains in limbo for the foreseeable future.
Can we get a motion so we can have discussion?
Yep.
So-
I will move that we adopt resolution 3-2024,
And then,
resolution resolving property line dispute as outlined by the, resolution before us.
Is that support?
I'm not supporting
I'll
this.
support.
Supported by Laura, moved by Jane, supported by Laura to adopt Village of Northport Resolution 3-2024. Discussion. Well,
Okay, first of all, the idea of exchanging, the use of the tree for the 4 feet, times 99, was mine. But this isn't what I proposed. What I originally proposed was, trading an easement for an easement, basically, not an easement for a lease. And it's really kind of tricky. I know Jim gave a good sales pitch right now, but he didn't really show you all the rough spots and the dents in this. The lease could be terminated within a year if the mitten leaves, if they go out of business, or if they break their lease. So we're getting a lease that could be shorter than a year, actually, in reality. The lease that Three Rivers has offered to the mitten is only 4 years. And if they don't renew, we lose our option on the tree. So if the mitten leaves in 4 years, not breaking their lease, we lose all our property rights to that. Carl's arguments, and I think this is why Jim said it's very unlikely that Carl would take this to court, because what's outlined here, as Carl said, oh, I've got it on a different page, but the maintained at 20 feet and the 66 by whatever, here, let me read it. I'm on the wrong document. Anyway, that legal argument has been analyzed by 2 previous village attorneys and our current village attorney, and even Jim himself. And my opinion, having gotten an A in property law, we all agree that Carl's arguments as to ownership, or not ownership, but to defeat the highway by user statute, his claims to that are specious. They're not legitimate. He would lose in court, according to everybody, all legal minds I've talked to. Even the guy we had do the replat, that lawyer said he would lose in court. So basically, we're giving him a property right forever in exchange for a lease that could be terminated in less than a year. I'm not gonna vote on this because I have a joint adjacent property. But I think it's a really bad deal for the village. I think it's extortion. I think Carl has the village over the barrel, saying, I'm gonna take away the tree and I'm gonna close down the mitten if you don't give me something that I have no legal right to. And if that's not the definition of extortion, I don't know what is. You guys have a tough choice, because you don't want to be the council that's responsible for the tree going dark. Nobody wants that. I think it's a really, really bad deal for the village, but you guys have to do what you're gonna do, because I think we lose either way.
Well, it's not, we don't just potentially lose the tree if we don't agree to this. A business
Yeah,
that, to my knowledge, their lease doesn't have much more time on it, or at least the extension. It did.
no, couple weeks, few weeks, the extension's till the end of February.
Yeah,
Right.
29.
So yeah, I mean, but like, are we gonna allow business owners saying, I'm gonna shutter my business if the village doesn't give me half of Hazarat Park? I mean, that's basically what's happening here. It's not as extreme
it-
scale.
no.
I know, look,
Yep.
I've said what I would say, and I really probably, I'll respond, but, I've said what I'm saying, I'm not gonna vote. And, I don't envy you guys having to make this decision, quite honestly.
Okay, does anybody else have anything to say before? I just had some questions, for Jim.
Certainly, I'm willing to answer questions. I will say one thing too, and I hadn't had a chance to convey this to Will, but, the lease that with the Mitten is going to be a 5-year lease, renewable, with an automatic 5-year renewable.
So that will be in the contingency of this resolution, because I'm not,
It'll be contained, no, it won't. It's contingent on a lease acceptable to the Mitten. My understanding is that's what the lease is going to be.
well, the least acceptable to the Mitten could be 1 year. We don't have any control over that.
That's true.
So basically, so everybody knows how this works, is that if you pass this resolution tonight, nothing's automatic. In other words, Jim isn't gonna we're authorizing him to take action based on Carl or Three Rivers taking other actions.
That's true.
And they all have to happen kind of simultaneously.
That's the only way we could really do it.
Right.
And meet the deadline.
So this
February 29th.
we're just authorizing Jim to proceed.
Right.
But you're authorizing him to give away 400 square feet. And yeah, I don't know what the value is, but it's really the location, having that quite a bit, well, 4 feet is 4 feet. It'll be narrower at the sidewalk, and that's really in the beer garden area. And I would really hate to see a fence go up in that asphalt. I don't think the DPW would like it. I don't think emergency services would like it. I don't see any reason for it. I've never heard a legitimate, cogent reason why Carl wants that 4 feet. But for some reason, he's making this a make or break for the village. And I think he's putting us in a really bad position. It sets a really bad precedent. I don't think it's pro Northport, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I think he would make some claim that he does own that 4 feet, based on his old, and
But he doesn't own the easement over it. We clearly own the 4 feet. We clearly own the easement at 20 feet wide, and that's just almost indisputable. I mean, the case law is rock solid on that. He does not have a claim in court.
Here's the other question too, is that we don't think Carl would sue us for that.
No,
right?
his lawyer wouldn't take the case.
And our village manager recommended that we don't pursue legal action.
Right.
And so where are we? That we're back to doing nothing. And I guess unless anybody has something
Well,
to
no,
say
what
to me.
we allow, if you pass this resolution tonight, you're gonna allow him to put a fence in that asphalt out there. And I don't know, I have heard he's indicated he's going to do that, and I really don't wanna see that happen.
Anyone else? Barbara, I thought you saw your.
Yeah, so the resolution has several numbers in it. And one is the quitclaim with which we've been discussing. And to relocate Park Street, to preserve the current location of buildings abutting the east side of Park Street. Permitting construction up to, but no closer than the line formed by the current buildings. Which preserves Will's ability to use his property like he.
That's why I'm abstaining from voting.
And, and number 6 is A, B, and C, which is the quitclaim deeds. The satisfactory lease for us to use the tree in the wall. And that the village manager has to have a copy of an executed lease between Three Rivers and Mitten.
Yeah, and the reason I wrote it that way, and Will's right, that Mitten could agree to a one-year lease. The reason I wrote it that way is because I did not want to get involved in dictating to either the owner or the lessee what their lease had to contain. It just had to be acceptable to them. And I did it that way largely because I think the real, I won't say guarantee, but the real assurance that the village has that it keeps what the benefit that it gets from this agreement is that the Mitten remain, or some other brewery or some other business like that remains at that building and the building remains unchanged. I don't think,
But if the Mitten changes ownership, our lease is no longer valid.
Yeah, we would have to negotiate another one with the new owner.
and I believe that that would not be a problem. Because the reason I say that is because it's the configuration of the building, the outdoor patio, the current fence, that is what preserves the benefit that the village gets. I don't think there'll be a substantial change on parcel A, where the Mitten's located, so long as it's operating, something is operating out of that building. The cost to do so is just
So
prohibitive.
one other issue I had was, you had a sort of draft lease there, which is not totally negotiated, I assume, with Carl and Three Rivers.
I believe the status is it's acceptable to both, is what I've been told. But again, I've not butted into that relationship other than for each of them to confirm to me, yes, it's acceptable.
If the tree needed something substantial, like trimming or removing, whose job is that?
We would have the right to do that if we chose, subject to the approval of the owner of the property. We have the right to do that.
But we don't-
That's why I keep referring to it as use, decoration, and maintenance.
Yeah,
Because one of the critical things that it allows us to do, I think we mentioned in the lease, the placement of spike watering wells. You know, where we can, which can also fertilize the tree.
Mhm.
Is the real difficulty of, any arborist will tell you, the difficulty of maintaining a tree surrounded by concrete is it doesn't get the absorption from outside the area of its root ball. And you need to do that with spike wells, and that gives us the opportunity to do that. We've got people that will bend over backwards to get us the resources necessary to do that if we have this ability. And I'd much rather that we, since we're the ones that are going to use the benefit primarily, that we be the ones responsible to do it.
Why can't we amend the resolution to make it, the contingency to be that the Mittens lease term is the same 5 years as ours? I mean, that would alleviate a lot of my concern, because I don't think the Mittens gonna go for a shorter lease, but they may, if negotiations break down between them and Carl, and they have many times. And the Mitten might say, well, we'll take 2 because it's better than nothing. And that leaves us with a 2-year lease, and I don't like that. And so I think that, we ought to reword it to make their lease the same length as our lease, in other words, 5 years. There's just too much good faith going on here and not enough law for me.
And I will actually agree with you 100% on that. But I would say, in this context, that's not a bad thing, because I really truly believe that's what needs to happen. That good faith needs to happen here. And I'll just leave it at that, because I think that's what needs to happen.
Chris?
This- I mean,
Um,
somebody has to be the one that'll stand up and say, I trust you. I trust that you're going to do what you say. Somebody has to take the risk, and I think it ought to be the village in this context. I think it's a good thing that the village is saying, we're willing to take a risk that our citizens will say, will do what they say they're going to do. And like I said, that's just me, but that's my take. I think Susan wants to speak.
Yeah, I see. Go ahead, Susan.
I'm with you on that, Jim. But one question I have, so what happens if Carl does sell the property? Does this agreement go with it or not?
No, it would not, but again, to the extent that, and one of the reasons that I would not particularly be concerned about that, to the extent that anybody has been interested in buying that property, it's been for the purpose of preserving the mitten. And again, as I say, the thing that really gives the village its ultimate protection is that you have a lessor or user of that property that wants that kind of relationship with the village, the kind of relationship that the mitten wants with the village.
So is Carl ready to remove his property from the market if we approve this and sort of go happily along?
I don't know, and I would not, frankly, Susan, not ask him to do that because we certainly can't condition this agreement on Carl retaining ownership. But again,
Well, he does.
while he does and while the mitten's there, that's the protection that we have. And as a municipality, I really don't think you can ask your citizens to do a whole lot more than that. Or your property owners. Citizens are not. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say, contrary to perhaps public perception, you have an owner of that property that deeply loves this community. I mean, I know there are those that are gonna disagree with me on that, but I've spent hours with Carl talking about this issue. And most of the time what we do is we talk about how special Northport is and how he wants to retain that. Now, why he's gone down the road that he did, I can't tell you. I can't tell you because I wasn't here when it happened, but I know what his attitude is towards this community and particularly that corner and its significance to this community. I know that very, very well. And like I said, I'm willing to get burned once, trusting someone to that level. If it happens and it's on me. But I'm willing to take that leap of faith. I wouldn't have negotiated this document the way that I did if I wasn't.
Anything else from the trustees? Jean or Laura?
I just want to say that I do agree with Jim also that I was actually going to say it before you did, but I was just listening to everyone, but I agree that we need to have some faith, that he's going to do the right thing and abide by what he's saying now. And I also believe that he will do that, assuming that we abide by what we say we're going to do. Like the trust goes both ways. And so I agree with those statements.
If there's no other discussion, the motion was made by Jane and supported by Laura to adopt Village of Northport Resolution 3-2024, a resolution revolving a property line dispute. We'll do a roll call vote, starting with Barb.
Yes.
Laura,
Yes,
Jane,
Yes.
and yes. The motion passes. Approve Jim to take some action. Right, that brings us to item B, approve contract with auditing firm. That was in the Dropbox.
I'll move that we approve the contract with the auditing firm UHY as presented.
Support.
All right, moved by Barb, supported by Jane to approve the contract with UHY as presented. Should we put a cap on that, the value? It's in the,
It's in the contract.
Okay.
Yeah, the contract specifies, again, 18,750 for the first year, 2,750 for the non-audit year, and 18,120 for the third year of the contract, which would be the fiscal 2025-26 audit, full audit.
okay. All right, just, I only bring that up because we had that one contract with the planning commission that did run over. Right,
It's a not to exceed contract.
okay, all right.
In fact, it says we submit the following all-inclusive not to exceed bid for the years ending June 24, 25, and 26.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so we got a roll call vote starting with Jean,
Yes.
Laura,
yes,
Barb,
Yes.
Will,
Yes,
and yes, motion passes. Next up is approved resolution to amend fee schedule.
Anybody gonna explain that one? And how it goes up 500% before we,
which,
the fee schedule?
the interpretation or which?
The fee schedule goes up 500%.
Here,
It's only specific
It's-
items.
Yeah.
Yes,
Two
it's just
Right.
2 items, and the fee for a zoning interpretation, before we ever had one, we thought that it might not be a very complex, time-consuming
Well,
process.
Or
and-
published.
the understanding when we changed the fee for the interpretation, which only happened last fee schedule, was that, and I was part of that, was that based on our zoning, that it wouldn't require a public hearing. And therefore, none of those costs would be associated with it, but it does in fact require a public hearing. It just wasn't outlined that way in our zoning, but it's a bigger law than our zoning. And so the $100 doesn't even cover the cost of that, let alone the time for the zoning administrator to generate the report for the interpretation and present. So the other 2 variances that you could file, a regular variance or with one other, they're both $500, and those were,
Rezoning.
Yeah, rezoning.
are $500. And so it's just to be in line with those, which those were also increased last time around, but that was again because we calculated in finance the cost of the public hearing, publications, the basic amount of time, et cetera. So,
And the other change, just establishing an escrow account is something that the township and many other municipalities do. And when we have a complex project, we want to make sure that we're able to cover our expenses.
so I think a really good example of that is the Fairway Residences.
Mhm.
So right now, for them to apply to get an LUP and a site plan review is $300. And that's all we can charge them, no matter how much time we spend, or if we have to consult our attorney about sewer things, all of these things. But $300 is where it's capped. And so this escrow policy is something that allows you to say, if you go over the amount that you've paid, you have to pay the remaining and not
And we
extra
have-
profit, you
Yeah,
just
we have
have
to provide an estimate of our costs.
And it has to
And
be real
estimate.
cost, it's not
Mhm.
just that we get to charge them whatever we want, and that's all outlined in the escrow policy,
Which has
so,
been adopted.
yes.
And I guess I apologize, because we talked about this in October, November, I think it was in December, and here we are, so February. Lots happened since then, but yes, thanks.
So. We do not have a motion on the floor yet, so I will move that we approve the resolution amending the fee schedule.
I'll support.
All right, moved by Jane, supported by Laura to approve the resolution to amend the fee schedule. I can just do roll call for this? No. Roll call? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, a roll call vote, starting with Will.
Yes.
Barb,
Yes,
Laura,
Yes,
Jane,
Yes,
and yes. Motion passes. Next up is approve the 2024-25 council meeting schedule. Dates are in the Dropbox.
I'd like to move to approve the 24-25 council meeting schedule, but amend it to be the second Thursday of the month. Because the website says the first Thursday of the month, and when it's not happening on the first Thursday of the month, the citizens are confused.
Weren't we doing that anyway? Does this reflect that? I didn't even.
no,
know.
it doesn't reflect that.
no,
So that's
So
what, that
didn't
was,
we want this to get the we were gonna move to the middle of the month to get the financials, give
We
Johnny a
talked
break?
about that, but never fully, decided that, and this is really the opportunity to do that. We could certainly amend the schedule, and we'd be happy to do so if that's the sense of the council.
I think
That
that
was
would
my
make the
same
staff
question.
happy, wouldn't it?
It
Do
would,
you agree?
it would.
Yeah, I mean, let's have a happy staff. Why not?
Happy citizens.
Yeah.
Don't show up when there's no meeting.
If that's the sense of the council, I think you can just amend the motion to do so, and we'll amend the schedule accordingly.
You won't even have to do any
I
substitutes
think
that
I
way.
made the motion.
You did.
Yeah, okay,
I
I
just need
second,
a second.
I'll second. Wholeheartedly.
It doesn't require a roll call vote.
Okay, so it's moved by Barb and supported by Will to approve the meeting schedule, but meetings will be the second Thursday of the month.
When's that gonna start?
I guess
March.
March, okay.
February.
oh.
No,
Yeah.
it's actually really good because
The
we're having
March
the hearing on 7th Street,
Yeah.
March 7th. So then we can, yeah, we'll be on schedule for the regular meetings. That's perfect.
Nice.
I just want to say that this resolves a conflict with my family reunion that has existed for several years now. So I'm grateful for this change. I've had to leave early for my meeting.
Excellent.
Cool.
Okay, so all in favor of approval, say aye.
All right.
Aye.
Any opposed, nays? There are none. Motion passive. Final item on our discussion action items is approval of amendments to the 2023-2024 budget. And those are,
I'll move that we approve the amendments to the 2023 and 2024 budget extending to 16 months.
Support.
moved by Barb, supported by Jane to approve the amendments to the 2023-2024 budget, extending it to 16 months. Any discussion? Okay.
I guess I have one question, but it's not about the extension, and I have to ask in the clerk report, I forgot, did we find anything out yet about the marijuana revenues, the dispensary?
No,
Okay.
the last year, well, you ticked me off this year.
Yeah, so that's why I was
Everybody's got
just
their eyes-
hoping maybe.
Eyes out there peeling for the number, and it really seems to come at the very end of February.
Okay.
That's what it did last year.
Okay,
Yeah.
I've heard it's up.
it is up, it's up about a lot,
23%.
23% up, but it's just, we don't know how
That's
many
like 10 Gs.
dispensaries. I tried to find out how many more there were this year than last year.
Oh,
but I
yes,
can't.
it's a big pie.
So,
Yeah.
but we don't know by how many.
Total
It would have to be
sales, though?
more than 23% to
Yeah,
make it
well-
not be more, so I'm hopeful, but that's why I was just hoping maybe.
I don't think you're gonna see a huge increase, but we'll
It's
see.
the same, that's good. It's
Yeah, even if
50-50.
it's
We'll take
holds,
it.
even if it holds, it's good because they thought it might be going
$66,000 next
down,
year,
so,
we'll
yeah.
take it.
Yeah.
Yes, it was
It was 50.
50?
56?
No,
56. I
It's
know there was
just
a
over
six in there.
50.
it's just over 50,000.
Oh. Still a lot.
It's,
It is,
I mean,
yeah,
it's
it's a lot.
a chunk of money, but,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we budgeted 50.
Yeah.
and
We did, because
And
they had
came
thought
in.
it was gonna go down, and so
Mhm.
that's why I'm really excited to
Mhm.
see if we can get that news.
somebody will let us know.
Yeah.
Okay, moved by Barb, supported by Jane, approval of amendments 2023-2024 budget. Roll call vote starting with Jane.
Yes.
Laura,
Yes.
Barb,
Yes,
Will,
Yes.
and yes, motion passes. Payment of the bills? That was.
December.
Sorry, I don't have any.
No, you're good.
Yeah.
I move we pay the, bills in the amount of $48,853.91 when funds become available.
Support.
Any discussion around that?
And I still really, I know that there's lots going on, but I definitely want to be sure that we work and get a policy that outlines how we're doing it, because again, like the refund, that would have been something that if it didn't already go out, could have been discussed, but now it. And it still can be handled, I'm not saying that, obviously, but
No, that's a good point.
if we can get a policy figured out,
We did,
and on,
with the purchasing policy, I think it's
Not-
gonna cover
not-
quite a bit.
Not the issue that Laura was
We
talking.
wanna-
And I also
we wanna-
don't wanna-
Township does it.
and I don't wanna hold up any regular payments of electric bills.
No,
because, like,
that's-
that's not what we're talking about, but just the unusual things on there. Cause if we can get that in place in the future here, then that won't
I
that
think-
won't
I think
happen.
Moving the meeting to the second.
Will help also.
will
Okay.
Facilitate
Yeah,
that.
that would help.
Facilitate that. Yes.
Can't let the township do stuff better than us. We're the rock stars here.
Any other discussion? Okay, again, it was, to pay the bills in the amount of $48,853.91. Roll call, starting with Will.
Yes.
Barb,
yes.
Laura,
Yes.
Jane,
Yes.
and yes. All right, motion passes. Second public comment. If you would like to make a public comment in Zoom, you can unmute yourself and I would recognize you and you could speak for 5 minutes.
Or less.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or less, 5 is the max. Mary, did you wanna?
I just have a question. What did I hear for March 7th?
I can answer that, I mean,
Sure.
or.
I mean, it can't, you're in and out when your voices and your heads turn, and I just heard March 7th meeting for what?
So you'll wanna be there.
Yeah.
So it's the 7th Street property.
Yeah.
Disposition, public hearing.
Yeah, public hearing, hearing that issue.
Oh, I heard that March 7th was the planning commission meeting where the date of the public hearing would be determined.
No,
Yeah, that's it.
That's it. March 7th is the public hearing.
The
Okay, there you
village,
go,
For
Mary.
the village council,
village
it's not planning
council,
commission.
public hearing.
Will it now be on the 7th or the 14th?
Well, that's a good,
Well,
We
Yes,
should
we already
separate
published it.
them. We should separate them. That way.
Well, what
We are.
Because we talked about that
we
at
did,
the last
maybe
meeting.
what, maybe,
Yeah.
well, thing to do would be to hold that public hearing on the 7th.
Yes.
And our regular meeting on the 14th.
that's what I was
I
saying.
think I just said that,
Yeah,
yes,
that's what we'll
that
say.
we just took care of that. And just got 2 birds, you know.
So Mary, I think is still unclear, as am I.
They're unclear, you can just say.
Yeah, so the public hearing for the 7th Street property is gonna be March 7th. And the regular village council meetings are now gonna be the second Thursday of the month. So next month's council meeting will be the 14th.
Okay. Do we have a where?
At the Northport Public School. No, I'm just kidding. It's gonna be here at the village, it's gonna be at the village hall. It's been published, so it's out there.
And on Zoom, you don't have to be here.
Yeah, Zoom, we'll have Zoom. Anyone else? Mike?
I'd just like to reaffirm something Jim said earlier about the partnership between the village and the township. I know continue to encourage that since he came on board the very first day. I came on down and we've been working closely together on some different ideas. So as you guys discuss, housing commission, all those type of ideas, we'll be discussing those at the same time. On background, we did pick the same auditor for NLTUA, the township, and the village, and it was actually a recommendation for Raymond. They were a pretty high profile audit firm. We had asked them to look at our business. They were obviously too high profile firm to do our business, but she gave us 3 recommendations. One of them we did not get a call back from, and the 2 we did get a call back. Those are the ones that we interviewed, and we were just as happy. The township and NLTUA was just as happy. Particularly before they leave, they're balanced with our auditor or with our clerk, which is really important to us versus the old firm that we had, which was basically what would happen is they get a lot of data and then they go back and just need an exchange of phone calls for a month or 2 or 3. And so we feel very comfortable within 30 days we'll get a written report. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Anyone else? If there's no one, we'll move on to council comment. And Jane? Laura?
Yeah, I would just like to stress again that whatever we can do to get moving on the housing issue, I think we should do, because it's a big, big thing to wrestle. And so, month by month by month goes by. People are waiting.
Chris,
Yeah, Susan.
first, I agree with Barb. Second, I want to thank Jim Dyer for the hours he has spent trying to resolve this issue that has burdened us. I think burdened all of us as a community for years. One of my first actions as a new council person in November of 2020 was to work out a deal. Will Harper and I worked out a deal, Carl, and whoa, it was all solved, and it wasn't. So I hope this is a solution. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Carl. If I were able to vote tonight, I would have voted the way you all did.
Thanks, Susan. Well,
I'm good.
okay. I just want to kind of piggyback what Barb said on the housing. I wanted to congratulate John and Kelly Keel, some Northport graduates, and they just secured a house on Ransom Street thanks to Larry Mobby and Peninsula Housing. So as we do continue to push forward with housing, we have had successes in this community. The houses on West Street, the houses over on Vincer North, and this now. So we are seeing results of the work, and I think that the more we do that, the more momentum we have, and I think more will come. So thanks to everybody for that.
I have a few comments.
Sure.
Mr. President, a couple things. First of all, I encourage everyone, if you have the opportunity this weekend and next, you have 6 opportunities to go to cocktails, canopies, and comedy at the Willowbrook Mills for the Northport Performing Center. I'm looking forward to doing that, and I have some flyers if anybody is interested. It's going to be 5 basically 1-act short comedies. I've seen the synopsis of them. They sound like they're real fun. I'm sure everything I've been told is you're going to have a good time at something like that, and hope to see other folks there as well. The second thing I would say, I couldn't agree with Dr. Conley anymore about the urgency of the housing issue. But I will say this, if you think it's gonna happen in the next year or even 2 years, we're looking, in fact, based upon a meeting today, we're probably not gonna see anybody moving into anything, even if we start tomorrow for another 4 to 5 years. But
No, I won't take,
I'm,
Kelly and John.
no,
Right.
I still need to learn. how to-
no, when I say anything beyond that sort of thing, and we're certainly looking for other opportunities like that. But if you're talking about a 20, 30, 40 unit development, probably not. We do have one possibility that's got some head start on it, but that's definitely the case. And my final thought on, with respect to the resolution of this dispute, I want to thank Will Harper, because as much as I've spent time with Carl on this, I've spent a lot of time with Will. We have beaten to death the issues, both he and I deeply respect his commitment to having a very clear definition of what we're doing going forward, and I agree with that. Like I said, I think we had an imperfect agreement, but the best we were going to get. But I really enjoyed working with him as closely as we did, trying to get to a solution, even though in the end we didn't agree on the final outcome. So with that, I have no further comment.
Okay. And so with that brings us to adjournment. If anyone had a motion for that.
I will move to adjourn.
I'll support that. All right, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. No, I know. Thank you.
I'm hoping. But
It is still recording.
I know.